Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Azure Thursday. This is the April 2021 edition. I'm here calling in from the Netherlands together with Jorrit. Hi, Jorrit. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, nice. So this month, we have 4 speakers over 3 sessions for you. So we have a packed evening. And at the end of the night, we'll have a giveaway for the people who registered through the link we shared in the previous edition. So stay tuned until the end, so you can find out if you want some awesome prizes.
That's a giveaway for the Azure Live VIP package. Yeah.
Right. All right. So our first speaker for today will be Jonah Anderson. Let's invite her to the stream. Hi, Jonah.
Hi.
Hey, Jonah.
Hi, everyone. Yes, great to be here. Thank you for inviting me to speak.
Sure, it's nice to have you. How are you?
I'm good, and I'm saying hi and hey to all the viewers that are watching us live today.
Cool. So I have a question for you. Yeah. You've started ramping up your public speaking. We've seen you started a YouTube channel. Right before the stream, you were telling us you have some other stuff going on. Tell us about it. How's it going?
It's doing great, actually. It's keeping me busy on the side of my full-time job as a software developer, and I really enjoy sharing knowledge and through public speaking, and also mentoring that I do on the side, because it doesn't just help me develop my skills in Azure and as a developer, but I also enjoy inspiring others to inspire more. So it's great. So April has been a full booked month for me, but it's awesome. More opportunities, and I'm glad to be here.
Well, I guess we're glad to have you, right? And yeah, you mentioned something about being a mentor as well. We know that you are a big supporter of gender equality, and that you also mentor other females in the tech business. To go out more, to be more of a public speaker, maybe to be more in the community. Well, we are obviously always looking for great speakers. So maybe you can hook us up next time with someone from your network that likes to do a session over here.
Yes, definitely. That's a great idea. I'll keep that in mind, and I'll let you know. I have a few people that might be interested. So that's great.
Yeah, that would be great. Right, thanks. So yeah, about your session today, you will be speaking about migrating .NET applications to the Azure cloud, how to be successful at it, and what not to do. Probably a lot of stories there. So yes. Yeah, we want to give you all the time that you need. So if you're ready, we're ready, and you can take the stage.
Yes, thank you. All right, so hi everyone. Thank you for tuning in, and today we'll be talking about things to consider when migrating your old .NET applications to the cloud. And this story, or this talk, is based on my real life project, Azure migration project. So as an overview, I will be discussing about that project, Azure migration project that I went through a few years ago, and the lessons that I learned from that project, and good to have Azure migration resources that you could use at the end of the session if you're considering moving your systems to the cloud. And as an introduction about myself, I am Jonah Anderson. I am a software developer at Forefront Consulting. Forefront Consulting is an IT consulting company based in Sweden with 400 employees in 6 offices in the country. So I am a full stack developer that codes mainly C#.NET, and very passionate about developing and learning Microsoft Azure technologies. And aside from my full-time job, on my free time, I do mentoring, and also public speaking by sharing my knowledge in hands-on projects by public speaking through Tech Talks. And as we're mentoring, I mentor different several young women to choose a career in tech and helping them out with different things in programming, advices, and all mentoring related stuff. And I'm involved in, I'm part of our Girl Code, which is a London-based women in tech community. And also here in Sweden, I'm part of mentoring members from Data and Guidance. And recently, I've started an Azure user group in my area in Sundsvall, Sweden, because I noticed that we have some good IT companies here, but there weren't any Azure user groups. So even though right now I'm alone in that user group, but I created it with a motivation and a hope that it will grow as a good Azure community locally. And on my free time, I like reading books, play chess, and spend time dog training with my Belgian Malinois dog, Jackson. So let me start my talk by showing you this cartoon. Is cartoon series which I first encountered while I was studying agile system development here in Sweden. So while studying agile system development for a few years, I encountered this picture, and I thought the picture were just series of cartoons with different images in it. But after working for several years as a software developer, working in different projects, I realized that this series of images makes sense to me, because this image describes the reality of the projects that we have in software development, not just software development, but in any type of projects. So this means that in every image, it illustrates that every project team members can illustrate the system requirements or a feature differently. For example, a customer wanted to have a feature in a system, and he or she described it in a certain way, but we programmers probably misinterpret it and interpret it and build the system or that feature differently. So I'm sure that some of you have seen this picture and can relate to this as well. And this is the reality that we have. And in order to solve this reality in software development projects is that we combine our different ideas and do a collaboration, so at the end of the project, we make something that what really a customer needs. And I wanted to share this because my Azure migration project is kind of like this. It kind of like illustrate this way. And the project was about that I was involved with for a few years ago was to move an existing application to the cloud. And I was the main person that were responsible in moving that project to the cloud. And why do we want to move that system to the cloud? It's because first, the existing system is in .NET, and we have our data in SQL databases. And also, we know that Azure had a lot of great services and benefits that could help us in our existing functionalities in the system. And the project, it is actually a project that is already, it's a at least 15-year-old system that is already running in production that has active users. So initially I was working in that project as a software developer and maintaining that system, fixing bugs, fixing new features, and adding developments in that. So that was the project, and the team were not actually the typical agile team in which it's composed of 3 to 5 members maybe. But the team that I had for that system was was pretty small. Actually, I was the only developer in that team, and there was a project manager, and there was a colleague, another software developer that I could collaborate and talk and pair programming sometimes when I need help. And we had a plan. So we planned on moving that existing application to the cloud. And the existing application looks like this. So it wasn't a 15-year-old, about 15-year-old ASP.NET monolithic architecture application, which was in .NET 4.7 framework. And the data were in Microsoft SQL Server, and the reporting services were, the reporting was also in SQL Server. And it was a typical monolithic on-premise system in which we have the Windows servers, the database server, the web server, and all the environments were in separate servers. But then it was pretty old. It was like a Windows 2008 R2. And at that time, there was an update released by Microsoft that they would stop supporting Windows 2008 R2, and there wouldn't be any security updates. So because of that update, because of that information that we received, we were determined to try to move our on-premise system and try to migrate it to the cloud. And our plan is to use Microsoft Azure, and as much as possible, keep it ASP, use the same code base like ASP.NET, and use Azure Web App Services and move the existing database or data into Azure SQL Server, Azure SQL, and then upgrade the reporting to Power BI. So that was our plan. And the cloud migration journey that we had went through different paths and alternatives. So the first path that we or I tried to do is to lift and shift the system into Azure VMs as an infrastructure as a service. But that first option was not the right one for us. It's because it was Windows 2008 R2, and based on the research that I did or that we did at that time, that version is not really compatible with the Azure VM that time, like years ago. So, and then the organization thought that it was too expensive and time consuming and too complicated to do the lift and shift because the servers or the VMs were hosted in a different third-party company. So it's kind of like complicated and expensive. So we changed our plan and switched to alternative path. We decided to rehost. So we updated our .NET framework tried to update it from 4.7 to 4.8 to be able to rehost it in an app service, and also try to export and import the database from SQL Server to Azure SQL as a platform as a service. And that didn't work either. So we did the lift and shift, we did the rehost and updating to app service as a pass. So what we did is lastly we tried the last resort. So we went back and tried to start as new, so which means that instead of updating to just .NET framework and everything and do refactoring, we started a new project and decided to use a .NET Core and rehost it in Azure using the services that we decided to do. So that project went for months actually, but it was a sole developer project because in parallel of doing the Azure migration project, I also had to maintain the existing system that's in production. So I did technical support, I did bug fixing, I did development. So it was two parallel jobs for one person, and To make the long story short, after several months of hard work, that project didn't make it to production. And the main reason for that is that even though we were moving forward, and I thought it was very exciting that we're moving forward with the .NET Core starting as new, it didn't make it to the production because the organization, the clients, or the stakeholders thought that it would take so much financial investment and money to invest on that migration to cloud project, and also the leadership of that organization were not mature enough to move to the cloud. And of course, being the only person that were cloud ready in the team and even in the organization was not easy. So it was a big project that a too big project for a one-woman project, one-woman resource. So that didn't make it, and I thought personally, I thought that that project was a fiasco because it just didn't make it to production, and I did my best, but it affected me personally, how I feel and how I feel at the work. So instead of me, the first person is very happy and excited about helping the system to move up to the cloud like a superwoman, I ended up 404, which means that I got stressed because it was too much work to do, too big project, and I personally realized that I was working too hard and working alone, and it was not easy to do it alone. So what I did is that I noticed that the system is not moving forward, and I wasn't developing as a developer. So what I did is I actually quit that job in that organization, and I took over a month break, and I spent some free time for myself, and even spent time enjoying life with my dog Jackson, who's a very happy dog. So I'm a person that likes to reflect so much, and I took a break, and did a reflection on what went wrong in that project. So I gathered some facts, and I realized that it's just not in life or in school that we learn lessons. We also learn lessons from our projects, regardless if it's small project, big project, simple project, or complicated project. We learn lessons from them. So I jot down all the top 12 lessons that I learned, and I thought that I would share with you. And the first lesson that I learned that is also very important is to carefully plan your cloud migration. This means that we need to identify or define our cloud migration strategy, not just as a team, but also as an organization, and also a strategy that we can work together with our clients or our users. And we need to do our homework first before we just move to the cloud. We need to ask questions. Is it worth it to move to the cloud? And we need to carefully study the business requirements, and also learn how your existing system or IT infrastructure works. Because if you're not well aware how your system works and the infrastructure works, it will be hard to plan the architecture that you want to build in the cloud. For example, in that system migration project that I was working on, it was an old system that were not well documented, and there were several developers that sat on it and coded the code base or coded the system in their own style. So it was kind of a messy system, but I was pretty positive to move it to the cloud. So I learned that it is important that we know our business requirements, and we know how we create our infrastructure based on the needs of our users. And of course, research the practical facts because it is important. And next lesson that I learned is that we need to fix technical debt first, which means that we don't want to bring the bugs into the cloud. So old tech, scrappy data, it needs to be fixed first. And we need to clean up outdated and old dependencies, because it's not good to have those things in the cloud. And also, we don't rush up flying up to the cloud with your tech debt. So these things are very important to consider before you do the first step of clicking the button and move it. And it's just like this quote that a goal without a plan is just a wish. So this is a very good quote that I thought I would share. And lesson 3, choose the right services. So aside from choosing the right cloud provider, for example, in our case, we chose Microsoft Azure. It's also important to choose the right cloud services. For example, there are a lot of cloud deployment models that we can choose from. For infrastructure as a service, we have virtual machines, which is pretty common for the lift and shift strategy. And there's also containers if you want to do microservices or container architecture. And there's also serverless, like Azure Functions as a service. So there are different options, including the web app service, which is also a powerful platform as a service. So it is important to choose the right cloud services and infrastructure in your cloud migration. And this is a good illustration that I found on Microsoft Learn. It is a lift and shift documentation for existing apps. For example, if you move it to Azure as an infrastructure as a service. So there are different maturity levels. So here, for example, is an existing apps, and then here we have the same thing that we tried to do in that project to migrate and rehost. But as you move to the right, and the more you modernize your system, the more the higher level of maturity you want to adopt to the cloud, the more you need to consider your architecture and your code base. So this is a good illustration about the maturity levels. And lesson 4, we need to be prepared to be cloud ready, which means that it's not just the developers or me as a software developer's responsibility to learn more about the cloud. Cloud transformation starts within us also, and also the leadership within our organization. So it is very important that we have the cloud knowledge and expertise upon moving to the cloud. And once we have that expertise, the cloud knowledge, then we can build our Cloud Heroes team and implement our strategy for that plan. So cloud readiness is very important. And lesson 5 that I learned, educate, inspire, and be transparent, which means that we need to inspire cloud to our coworkers, to our team, to our organizations, and even our clients. And then we also need to educate our others and our clients about security, because based on my experience and what I've heard, many people or many organizations are worried or concerned about moving to the cloud because of security issues, security concerns. They're not sure if their data or the system will be secured over the internet. So as cloud developers or cloud technologies, we need to inspire and educate our clients and organizations that there are cloud services or Azure security services that can comply and fulfill the need for security in our system. And also choosing right Azure services. This means that we don't need to follow the trend. We need to choose the right services based on the business requirements that we have for our users. So this means that if you heard from other organization, oh, it's a trend to work with containers, with serverless. Yeah, that's great. You can learn from them, but you need to create a line of, you need to create an Azure infrastructure, a cloud infrastructure based on what your system needs and what your user needs. And we also need to be transparent about Azure costs. So before moving to the cloud, we need to evaluate how much would it cost us to move and get or acquire the services in Azure. And this also means that we are also transparent with our clients, so we cannot just charge them with different services. And lesson 6, the 4S. I called it the 4S because it's a good S. This means, but a very important one. This means that we need to start small with small steps. So, for example, when we decided to move that .NET to start as new in that .NET Core application, we decided to start small by first fixing the login and designing the database tables for that. So we had to start small. So it is important to do the small stuff instead of creating a big step and then you cannot comply it or you cannot do it. So the 4S is also worth considering for. And then lesson 7, choose the best data migration strategy. So data migration is one of the things that many are also concerned about when it comes to cloud migration. So this means that when you're planning your cloud migration, it's important to identify how you want to store your data in the cloud, because there are a lot of options. And aside from that, you also need to consider the pricing for the cloud storage and be aware about the costs that will incur in certain type of Azure data storage. And relational versus non-relational NoSQL. For example, if you're moving a structured database, a relational database into the cloud, and you know that in a few years you might need to create a feature that requires you to save unstructured data, for example, blobs and images and videos, then probably it's worth considering to redesign your data strategy or database into something else. So maybe you could make use of Azure Cosmos DB, which is a very powerful database that allows you to store different types of data. And also, don't move to the cloud with your old dummy data. Like sometimes when, for example, in that system that I worked on, I had to do a lot of data corrections and data cleanup because there were a lot of tests and dummy data that were left from many years ago. So don't bring that up. Don't bring the scrap to the cloud. And lesson 8. Security and privacy. It is also very important. For example, here in Europe, we have a GDPR policy, which protects the personal data of every person in Europe. So before you consider moving your data into an Azure SQL database, check first if your existing data has personal data that might cause GDPR policy violations. And then next is Azure. If you're not sure how Azure or your cloud provider works with GDPR or privacy information, then Azure has GDPR regulations for that and compliance for data protection. And lesson 9, identifying the right authentication or user identity services for your cloud system. So in a traditional on-premise system, we usually, in that system that I worked on at least, we use a traditional login with sessions. That was the old on-premise variant, but when you move to the cloud, there are a lot of options, especially now that everyone has Office 365 and also have Azure. So you need to choose the right user identity or authentication service for your system. So there's Azure Active Directory and Microsoft Graph and SSO. And lesson 10, next is seek best practices and learn from others. So if you're not sure which path is the correct, the right or the wrong path, then, and you lack expertise in your organization or team, then seek advice from others and find the cloud experts that you have in your area. Or if you can't find one in your area, find someone in your network and ask for help, and also contact your cloud provider that you're thinking to move to. And it's very important because succeeding slowly is better than failing fast. So this lesson is very good to have. And lesson 11, cost planning and pricing evaluation is also important upon moving to the cloud, which means that we need to make use of the resources that we have, for example, Azure, the cloud provider that we choose. So in Azure, there's the Azure pricing calculator that you don't need to even have the subscription yet. Before even signing up, you have the option to calculate how much this services, cloud services that you want to use would cost you. And there's also the TCO calculator in which you can do comparison between the on-premises costs as well as your probability of costs that you will have when you have your services in the cloud. And also there's also Azure Cloud Management. And lastly, but not the least, don't rush rocket flying up to the cloud, because moving to the cloud is not easy and it takes time. You need a good cloud team, and you need the knowledge. So don't rush doing that, because if you rush, you will suffer the consequences that it might affect your organization or your business. And some good resources that I would like to share with all of you. I would like to share about a great resource of Microsoft, which is the Cloud Adaptation Framework for Azure, which is a good guide that are worth checking for. It helps you, it guides you through defining the strategy, the plan, being ready, how to adapt and migrate, how to innovate when you're done with that, governance and management. And also part of the cloud adaptation frameworks is the cloud migration motivations. So there are motivations and triggers for that. So please check on that. And also Azure Migrate, as well as the Smart tool. And also, lastly, I would like to share about, especially for architects and Azure developers, when you're planning your applications to the cloud, it is important to think of these top 10 design principles for Azure applications. Design for healing. This means that if you build an application, you need to build it that it will self-heal upon failure, and make things redundant. Also, is it's about it is about avoiding single points of failure and all this important things. So you can check out the details on the link that it is on the presentation. And what I really like about this top 10 is the design for evolution, because as a developer, we cannot just build something because we want to fix and solve the problem or build based on the requirements. We need to design and build a system that would last for a lifetime. I mean, that will last with the evolution of our digitalization. So it's really good things to consider and check it out. And to summarize, I shared about me a bit, and I shared about my cloud migration experience and some of the lessons that I learned, and things to consider when you migrate your old apps to the cloud, and some good resources to check out after this talk. And lastly, I would like to share this quote of Benjamin Franklin that by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. So take note of that when you do some planning for the cloud migration. And be cloud ready. And because of my experience, even though it was a kind of like a fiasco for me and it affected me personally, it was a great experience, and I learned a lot that I am here right now standing and sharing this lessons learned. And I'm also more motivated to inspire cloud to others. And I'm also one of the Azure heroes. So I really look forward to share more cloud to others. So if you have questions about my talk today or feedback, you can contact me using the contact information in the screen. And there's also a website of my company where I work for right now. And I would like to thank you so much for taking time to listen to me and my story, and I hope you learned something. Thank you.
I think Roel is still muted. We can't hear him at the moment.
Can you hear me?
I'm sorry, I was too engaged in the talk to unmute myself.
Oh,
No, I just wanted to say thanks a lot for this session. I think this is really valuable information for everybody listening to this who either is a cloud developer or wants to become a cloud developer.
yes. I hope you learned something. It's from the heart, and it's a real life experience. And this is one of the major reasons why I'm really passionate to share cloud and be an Azure hero, because we need it. We all need it, and it's very important. And this is also the reason why I want to advocate gender diversity, because it is important. So I hope you learned, and also the viewers learned something.
I think everybody learned a whole lot, and I think Jorrit and I were riding along, and we wrote down a couple of questions we really would like to ask you.
Yeah, sure. If you have time before the next one, sure.
I
We have a few minutes.
think we still have some time. Yeah, so the first one that kind of struck me in the heart, because I was in the same situation. So I was wondering, considering your experience on the project you told us about, what's your opinion on working as a sole developer?
My opinion, it was both actually a challenge. It wasn't easy working alone, because I'm a developer that can work independently and also like working in a team. And I wish I had a great team that were also as passionate as me, and bringing things like improving the system and move it up to the cloud. But it was both. The advantage is that I got to learn a lot about Azure, but the disadvantage is that I had to do a lot of job that, to the point that I was stressed and it was too much that I had to quit the job. And the most of the major things that affected me, I had no problems working on the project alone. And I was very positive, but the thing that challenged me and was hard for me was the leadership, and I wish I had that support and a better team. But yeah, that's how it went. To some things in projects you cannot control, and all you can do is just do your best and learn from it.
Okay. Oh, that's a
Yes.
great response. So, yeah, you know, but it's great. And you mentioned that you lack the support. So after your break, you took a 1 month break. Nice picture of your dog, by the way.
Yes.
So how did that work out for you? Is there more support where you are at now?
Actually, I took a break, so I quit the job. But right after I took the break, I got a job offer, and I am very glad in my existing or current company right now, because I feel more collaboration, and I feel more appreciated in what I do. So I'm very glad for that, and they're very supportive in what I do. So I mean, I'm a person that's not shy, and I'm very transparent to share my personal experience, because I want to inspire others. And sometimes I can be shy, but sometimes it's good to just voice it out and tell the truth. There's nothing to hide.
Yeah, I think probably plenty of other developers have gone through similar things as you have, and
Yes.
it's always good while you're sharing this experience, they know they're not alone, right? And everybody makes these
Yes.
mistakes in the beginning. So
Yes.
you mentioned a couple of times in your 12 tips that you have to go and choose the right services for the right application, right?
Hmm.
I'm saying right a lot of times after one another. Um, do you have any good resources or tips on how to make those choices?
Um, Good questions. I think the number one resource is the Microsoft Azure documentation, and of course, if you're in the process of moving things or your applications to the cloud, then it's good to take advantage of the resources that I mentioned, the Cloud Adaptation Framework as a guide, and also there's a Microsoft assessment tool for that, for the migration. So Microsoft has a lot of, I'm pretty amazed that they have like a lot of resources for the users in supporting Azure migration. And I wish that I learned about that a long time ago when I was in that project, but I didn't get pretty involved with Azure and motivated to learn more about things, the deeper things in Azure, until I experienced this failure in the project. So now I'm like fired up and excited, and I'm excited to help other organization move to the cloud. So one of my like things, one of the careers role that I want to be is I want to be a cloud architect. So I want to code at the same time, help out with the architecture when they want to move to the cloud. So I'm excited.
Yeah, sounds like a great role. And well, you mentioned your contact details right at the end of your presentation, but I think we also mentioned that you've just started a YouTube channel. I didn't see it on the list. Where can we find it?
It is. It's pretty new. It was on the first part of my presentation.
Okay.
So it's a meetup. It's called Azure User Group Sundsvall, and it's also actually listed on my website, jonahanderson.tech. So all stuff about me and the contact information is there, and I blog about Azure in some of my projects, personal projects. So those users or listeners that want to learn more, they can definitely visit my website or connect to LinkedIn. And I'm also, if there are women listening right now who wants to be inspired by me, so feel free to contact me and maybe we can help out each other, like mentorship.
Great tip. Well, I think we're out of time right now, but it was a great session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and it's great to be here. Thank you for the opportunity, and wishing every listeners to have a great Easter holidays soon.
Yes. Same to you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye. So I guess that brings us to the end of this session and at the beginning of a new session. The next one, I think, will be from Dawodu and Kati. I don't know if they're already backstage right now.
No, not yet. You're not expecting me probably, but they're not in there yet. So we're trying to reach them. So we'll probably postpone till like 10 minutes to 8 or something.
Okay, so 5-minute break for everyone to get a cup of coffee.
Yeah,
Stay
I'll
awake.
try to get them in the stream, and then we'll continue it then.
That's fine. We'll be right back then.
Connection is a spark that gives our lives meaning. It drives us to seek out others who feel the same way.
Okay, why don't you input the data and we'll take a look together. Hey Mari, what you got for me?
To find those who share our views, yet offer different perspectives.
So this neck. Look over here.
Challenge us with new ways of seeing.
That I think we should.
Deepen our understanding. And enrich our lives.
最后一笔的时候，往前。
Great things happen when we commit to something bigger than ourselves.
Take a closer look at it.
Place this here. Let's see how we go from there, okay?
This sense of collaboration and the feelings of connection it brings excites us.
Hey, just in time. I'm gonna move it slightly, okay?
It's yours, take it.
We have 2 planes right now on the same trajectory.
As we put people first, technology fades into the background and feels like anything but.
Aisha, what do you think?
I think if we had 330, maintaining 2800,
we'll be clear for approach.
Excellent.
This changes the way we see the world, and in turn, changes the world we see.
These numbers are looking great, actually.
There's promise in the possibilities, and what we see and create next will stretch the imagination.
Good morning, Sarah.
Morning.
Slowly coming towards the thumb.
A world without boundaries.
Good job. A lot better than yesterday.
Yeah.
Excellent. Slowly bring the
A
arm
world
down.
where technology enhances, not limits, humanity. With people front, center, and in the spotlight. The future is here. And here can be anywhere. Introducing Microsoft Mesh.
Yes, sure. The next session will be hosted by a duo actually, Dawoudou Idrissou and Cathy Frans. And they are both software developers, but a lot more than just software developers, right? They are also Auth Zero ambassadors, Udemy trainers, CTOs of companies, all that. They're really down with the community. So we are really glad to have them. And well, their session is going to be about migrating MERN stack into Azure with best practices. And yeah, MERN is obviously it's Mongo, it's some Java, Express, React, Node. They will teach you all about it. But yeah, I'm myself am really interested in how that should be moved properly into Azure. So yeah, hopefully we can bring them in soon and learn all about it.
Yep. You know, when I was looking at Kati's profile, or I was like Googling him for a little bit, I'd never heard of him. And then if you see what he has done in the past years, it's unbelievable. So
yeah, for sure.
He has up to, I think it's like 150 hours of training material on Udemy. 65,000 people have already followed his lessons. He's a maintainer of this open source headless CMS Tensei.js, which I would like to ask him a question about. And I think Dawood, the last time we saw him here on the stream. Hi, there you are.
Hey, how are you?
Yeah, I'm just getting Cathy connected in a few minutes. Hey, Cathy.
Hi, guys.
Hi, guys.
Thank you guys so much for
Yeah, so apparently I and Cathy happen to be in Nigeria currently. I left Ghana today. An impromptu meeting came up, so I was just rushing up to get to my hotel, connect to the Wi-Fi's and be able to attend the meeting. I know I and Cathy could not really, get into conversations all through me being in the flight. Yeah, but I mean, we've been doing this for many times, so I believe you are going to take it away.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we've already done the introduction.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I think I'm just... yeah, so this conversation for like 4 years now. I got to know...
I think the Wi-Fi in the hotel is lagging a little bit. So, Cathy,
Cathy 2016, and when we met, we were thinking about building projects together.
Yeah, I think that was the Wi-Fi.
There's a cable coming, I think.
Yep.
Cathy, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now. So I think we are set up. Thank you.
Great.
Awesome. Dawood is plugging in.
Yeah, plug in. It's okay. So can you hear me too?
Yes, we can.
Is the network better now?
Yeah, much better. Yeah, you were breaking up a lot, but it's. I think it's good.
Yeah, and I just received a password from the guest house that could allow me to log in with DS, which should be better. So I'm just going to pass it over to Kathy right now so that we take it from the session. So I was, when we're preparing for the session, I was talking to Kathy that I think this should be more of information session. And then we might just think of jumping straight into the app. But if we don't give it a careful thought, then we will be missing some things, right? So, hey, Kathy. You've been building stuff for a while, and you are an open source, maintainer, and you've been doing amazing stuff. You've inspired all of us, and it's just amazing doing this with you today. Maybe you should go ahead.
Well, he broke up again, but I think he meant to say that you should go ahead and introduce yourself.
Then introduce yourself to the audience.
Yes, sure. So my name is Franz. I'm super grateful and honored to be here. I'm very happy to, talk about my experience. So in the past 4, 5, 6 months or so, Dawood and I have been collaborating on a couple of projects that we've deployed to Azure together. So that's where this idea came up. We could share about experience, the different challenges that we had, talk about the best practices, why you would want to use certain Azure services for some certain problems that you encounter while deploying your applications. So that's where we got this idea, and I would be very glad to share my ideas and experience with you guys today.
Awesome, and we're really glad to have you here, a Udemy pro, right? A famous Udemy contributor. So this is bound to be good. So by all means, go ahead and take it away.
Okay. Do we have Dawood? Okay. So the application we have is a full stack application, and we kind of decided to choose an application that has all the different services that you might need in a real world project that you are working on. The application we have is an application built with React on the client side, and it's built with Node.js on the back end. It uses MongoDB for data storage, and it also has an additional layer of Redis for caching and also for some faster operations like vote counts and things like that. So we are going to kind of show how we would do that on Azure, kind of show some little pitfalls that you might have if you're deploying this on your own from scratch, and also some best practices or recommended practices that we would use if doing that from scratch. So Dawood, where are you? Should probably share his screen. Okay, so while waiting for Dawood to pop in, we're just going to talk about the first service that we would want to deploy, which is our database layer, and that's MongoDB in this case. So when you're deploying a database into production, what are the things that you are concerned about? What are the things that you want to make sure that your application has or your database has before you push it to production? So the first thing you have to think about is availability for your database and scalability. So first, availability, you want to make sure that your database has the least amount of downtimes as possible. So no matter the amount of traffic coming to your application, your database should be able to handle it and not go down on you, because that would be a really poor user experience. Second thing you want to take into consideration is scalability. Is it possible for your application to scale when there's high traffic? Maybe you are growing really fast, much faster than expected. How easy is it going to be to scale your database from one tier to a second tier? Very important thing you have to take into consideration. And that's when Cosmos DB actually fits perfectly, because all of these things are they come out of the box for you. You don't even have to worry about them. And you have 99.99% guarantee of availability and throughput for your application. And you're also sure that no matter how fast the traffic grows, your database communication would have very low latency. You also want to think about backups. And these are actually things that I've encountered every time I'm building applications, and it's been challenging. So let's say you want to spin up a droplet by yourself and actually install your own database instance and set up automatic backups. It's really challenging. But with Cosmos DB, once you can just click a few buttons, you have your automatic backups already set up to 6 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours, 7 days, depending on the needs of your business and depending on how much data you actually want to store. So Cosmos DB figures out all of this for you. And you also want to make sure that the pricing model for the database that you are choosing also fits with the business that you are running. So you should be able to estimate and have a flexible pricing model so that as the needs of your applications change, then the pricing model just fits into that scenario. So all of these are advantages of why you would want to use Cosmos DB. So that's the first service that I think would be really great when you're considering using an application that is backed by a MongoDB backend. That's Cosmos DB. I don't know if Dawood is available. He should be able to share with us some ideas about deploying a Cosmos DB instance.
I think Dawood is running through the hotel trying to find a decent connection to join the stream again. Was he supposed to share his screen?
Yes, he's supposed to show us, a database that we deployed for the sample application.
Okay, so you were talking about Cosmos DB. That was the choice you made, at least for this demo, right?
Yes.
So how does this demo application, how do I say this, justify the cost of Cosmos DB, if I'm not being blunt?
I'm sorry, can you come again?
So as far as I'm aware, Cosmos DB is a pretty costly solution, right?
Yes.
So maybe I'm wrong, but so this application, does it actually does Cosmos DB serve it better than any other database solutions, or is this something you chose just for this demo?
Actually, if I am going into production with an application, Cosmos DB is a very good choice, and I'll explain why. Now, when you're choosing whether you should self-host your database or which service you should use for your database, the cost is very important, obviously, but you also have to think about the cost of your future engineering team. For example, if you are going to choose a database solution that is just hosted with no backups, then you have to spend engineering time, which is also money, on creating a backup solution. You probably also have to spend some time in setting up multi-region support for your database to be automatically available in different regions depending on where your users are located. So all of these coming out of the box is a no-brainer for me to choose. Now, this also depends on the application, obviously. The application Dawood and I were working on was FinTech, and the amount of reads and writes to the database is very important. Also, the security of the data was very important. So that's why we choose Cosmos DB for that application. That's why I would choose Cosmos DB for any application that has critical data, because the payments that you make actually cover a whole range of things and not just the database storage or database access.
That's a comprehensive answer you just gave me. So I have another question. I think we can say you're one of the JavaScript guys, right? You're one of the main contributors to Tensei.js. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I'm one of the main contributors.
So could you tell us a little bit about what it is?
Yeah, sure. So Tensei is my solution to building backend applications. I think in the past few years, as a front-end engineer, you would realize that there are many of these services popping up to completely eradicate the jobs of backend engineers. We have Azure, which is amazing for generating a GraphQL API. We have Firebase, which has like an automatic backend and authentication for you. We also have many services releasing functions. We have serverless functions on Amazon, serverless functions on Azure. So many of these services are kind of setting up a backend, but there are advantages and disadvantages. So Tensei tries to, be the person in the middle that gives you 100% full control of your backend, but still gives you amazing superpowers to go as fast as possible. For example, with just a few lines of code, you can define create, read, update, and delete for, anything that you can think about. So you can also add authentication with literally just one line of code. You just put a plugin and then you have authentication authorization. You can choose between JWT authentication, session-based authentication, refresh tokens, access tokens, and two-factor authentication, email validation. We just add in a single plugin, and if your application does not need it, you just remove it. So all of this gives you like a lot of flexibility on being able to create your own applications. It comes with an optional content management system. If you build your applications and you want to manage your data, you can just pull it out if you don't need it, or put it in if you do. So we are kind of very particular about writing as minimal code as possible when you want to build your application, so you can go as fast as possible. But in future, as your company grows, then you can scale with that. You can just, open up Tensei. And that's the beauty, because Tensei is just an express application, and you can just break it up in future if your company begins to grow exponentially. So basically, Tensei is going to give you a GraphQL API or a REST API, again, your choice, so that you don't have to install things you don't need. GraphQL or REST, authentication and authorization with JWT or cookies, your choice, two-factor authentication if you need it, email validation if you need it, a full-blown CMS for managing your data if you need it, tons and tons of other really amazing stuff coming. But that's basically what Tensei is.
So then if it's built on top of Express, right?
Yes.
So for all of these features, are you plugging into Express modules, or are you writing those yourself?
So for example, if you want to use CORS, you can just use the existing Express module. But for authentication, we write ourselves so that we can have full control on how exactly it works. So the CMS, for example, it's a plugin. You plug it into your Tensei application. It just gives you your CMS, because you can read your application, know the resources. Maybe if you're building a blog, you will have posts, categories, and things like that. So it just generates your CMS for you once you plug it in. And about your question, yes, it registers Express routes behind the scenes and handlers and middleware. But at the end of the day, you don't even have to think about that. It just works. And it's written custom so that we can have more control.
I mean, this is really awesome. I know my network is struggling again. I was trying not to talk in the middle of, Kati's presentation, because I knew my network is going to struggle. Yeah, but we really had like awesome content here. But are you able to hear me clear though? Because I'm the only person who seems to be hearing myself breaking so much here.
No, we can hear you perfectly. No problems. So if you guys want to try to pick up your session from here, it's totally fine.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I'll turn off my video just so that because I feel my network is really bad, which means my video might, let it really not go well. So I'll turn off my video so I can just manage with the network I have here.
Yeah, sure. Are you able to share your screen and just show us around Cosmos DB, kind of the configurations that you need to set up, the reasons why you would probably choose certain configurations over the other, and the advantages that these have for a business?
Absolutely. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly just to show that. Please confirm if you can see my screen.
Not yet.
Okay. All right. I think it should be up in just a few seconds.
Okay.
Yeah. So like Kathy mentioned earlier on, we've been having conversation about an app we are building behind the scene, and then we kind of, put so much thinking into it. So we started with a question when Kathy asked me that, hey, Dawood, what exactly, how are you going to deploy this application? And I was like, okay, Kathy, I think this is a great question you asked. And I was just about to say that, Azure has infrastructure as service. So I'm just going to create, a server. And after creating the server, I would just, set up, some web systems, and I would be able to host my web application through the server. So Kathy was like, hey, Dawood, have you talked about, performance? And I was like, that's really something I haven't really talked about. So I think that's a question that needs to be, addressed. So it's more like in building an app, you just don't jump straight into, because Azure has all services, you just don't jump straight into choosing anything, but you have to ask yourself that, what do I need to let my app perform better? Kathy, can you confirm if you can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so let me just switch directory. Just a second. Okay. So Kathy, whilst I'm trying to just log into my personal account from here, so what have you actually learned between deploying platform as service application as opposed to deploying infrastructure as service applications?
So choosing how to deploy your application is also a really huge part for your engineering team to figure out, as we learned. So first of all, you have to think, what amount of engineering power do we have? Do we have a dedicated DevOps team? Do we need a dedicated DevOps team for our application? And that's a really important question. So if you're starting out, you'll probably have just maybe 2 founding engineers. You do not want to spend time on DevOps. You do not want to spend time thinking about if your server is running, or if you have to update your SSL certificate, or if your server just went down and you need to scale by increasing more servers. You don't want to worry about that. So that's where platform as a service really shines, because you just deploy your application and it's automatically fully managed for you. Probably you can just scale by increasing the number of containers that are assigned to your application. So when your team begins to grow and you get more engineers, and you can actually have a dedicated engineer for your DevOps processes at your company, then you can begin to go into infrastructure as a service. At that time, your application is large enough to actually have a dedicated engineering team for DevOps, and also it's going to really need that team to focus, and your other engineers can focus on their products. So that's how I would choose between one or the other, depending on the needs of the business. So 3 months or 4 months ago, when Dawood and I were working, the needs of the business were kind of pretty straightforward. We had just a very small engineering team, and we needed to launch fast, and we had no time to be checking on if the server is doing fine, what about the RAM, what about this, and what about that. So we just went straight to using the platform as a service. And I think that was the best decision we could make at the time. So yeah, so I think that's what I think.
So Kathy, I'm just thinking very quickly about, actually deploying, aside deploying the back end and then the front end. When we were exploring, one of the things that we thought about was that it's really tedious to, deploy a front end application, but it looks like Azure has a service that makes it, seamless. for one to be able to, quickly deploy whatever application they prefers. And I think that in particular you mentioned, which I told you I tried it out, was, there. Okay, so I'm just trying to log in. Okay, I think now I'll be in. Okay, so that is, Azure Static App, which allows you to just deploy your front-end applications within a click of buttons. But one thing I think we thought more about was about the database, right? How are we going to go about the database, right? And I think we then decided that why don't we just, leverage on the best database out there within Azure, which is, Azure Cosmos DB, to be able to fit into our needs. I just want us to be very clear here to whoever is listening to us. What were some of the informed decisions that, we considered before we took, Azure Cosmos DB? Would you want to highlight that from your end?
Yeah, sure. We talked extensively about it, but just to highlight the main points, number one that we needed was availability. We needed almost no downtime. It was very critical. You lose downtime, you lose customers, and business is not good. Secondly, we need scalability. If tomorrow we have a to handle it and kind of increase the size of the database or RAM or whatever we need. We also wanted to make sure that the higher the traffic to the database, we need low latency throughout. So that's also one of the things that we were looking out for. Thirdly, we needed really, really frequent database backups, and we did not want to think about it. So that's also one of the things that we took into consideration. Fourthly, we also needed multi-region support. For example, if our database is located in New York, then if that database goes down, or if there are users connecting from different parts of the world, we should be able to automatically replicate that database for different regions so that it's easier to fetch data for those users also. So all of these things coming together, we could obviously set up this infrastructure ourselves, or we could also, use a service that would give us some of this infrastructure and then set up the rest ourselves. A possibility was just, creating a database on an Ubuntu instance and then automating a backup script that would upload the backups to S3. But that's more engineering time. That's a lot of things that you have to put in place. So the obvious choice was to go with Cosmos DB. Compared to the amount of things that we needed and the cost that we were going to pay, it was actually a no-brainer for us.
Awesome. Kathy, just you mentioned about latency. I think in exploring, which region should we choose was a question that we all had to, ask ourselves. And depending on the region that you choose, could actually affect, the performance of your application. Just a quick one there. I think we found out about a link that could easily help one to be able to find, the right region that should work for him. Do you mind sharing that link in particular?
Yes, now that you have your screen, I think it would be great to just visit the link so everyone can partake. It's Azure Speed Test. I'm just going to share it in the chat, but you can also visit it on your screen, Azure Speed Test.
Absolutely. All right, so I'm just going to go there right into that and see what exactly we get. So if you do not know about it, maybe you can check it up. It was shared to me by one MVP. So when we were exploring about, which region should we choose to be the best for us, I just told Kathy that, hey, you know what? There's this tool out there that helps you to be able to detect which, region would work best for you, depending on where the users of your application, are located, right? So, yeah, I think those were the informations.
Dawood, can you hear me?
Yeah, I absolutely can hear you.
Great. I'm sorry for the intrusion, but we have unfortunately run out of time. And we have another session coming up that also needs the sign language as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it was a little bit unfortunate. The internet connectivity is kind of joy breaker here.
Yeah.
Can we just
wrap up?
Be in contact after this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think though it happens, we couldn't really share much of the things that we prepared behind the scene. I felt these were actually valuable information that helped us to make informed decisions when it came to deploying the app that we were building behind the scene. It's actually a company app, so we prefer to just call it app and app. But yeah, I think it was valuable time sharing and building stuff with Kati together, and this is what we had to share with you. Kati, any last word from you so that you pass it over to the next speaker?
So just thank you guys very much for having us. My DMs are open. We can always talk more about, if you want to deploy your applications to Azure or generally making any decisions about deploying your applications, you can chat us up, and we would love to share our knowledge. Thank you guys so much for having us.
Yeah, you're really welcome, and I hope to see you again.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. So, hey,
I'm back.
Yeah, that was a bit unfortunate, but Robin is already waiting behind the scenes. So let's bring him in. Hey,
hi guys.
Good evening, Robin.
Good evening.
Hi, Robin.
How are you tonight?
Good. Looking forward to the weekend, but overall.
Yeah, aren't we all? 4 days, right?
3 days. 3 days.
3 days.
So, but yeah, man, everything good. And with you guys?
Yeah, we're coping, I guess. Right?
Chugging along. No, we're having fun. Did you see the first session of the evening by chance?
Yeah, I did.
That one, I'm still processing that one, I think. And of course the second session was a bit of an unlucky one. But still, there was some good stuff in there, so I'm still having fun. So what I wanted to ask you, Ruben, in your bio it says that since the age of 12 you've been into computers and IT and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So around what time did Microsoft spark your interest, and Azure in particular?
Oh, Azure in particular, I think 5 years ago, something like that. So I started with Office 365 and automatically stumbled upon Azure AD, of course. And from there on, I just moved more towards Azure. And now I'm at the point I'm just doing Azure and no Office 365 anymore. So yeah.
Yeah, that's also good news for you, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, tonight you're going to do a session called the Azure Bakery.
Mm-hmm.
I think, which is based on your blog series, right?
Yeah, correct.
Well, we are looking forward to your talk where you can explain it in real life. Will you also link to your blog series somewhere?
Yeah. At the end, one of the last slides includes like a shortened URL, a tiny URL to the blog series. And otherwise, everyone who already wants to start reading can just search for the Azure Bakery, and then you will find it.
It's a catchy title. There's probably no one else that has it. So if you're ready, let's go.
All right, let me figure this one out. Share my screen. So, do you guys, okay, this works. All right, good. Then let me do this. Do you guys see my presentation? Yeah, okay, that works. All right.
We can see it. It's fine.
Good. Otherwise, just start without a slide deck. So, all right. Welcome to the Azure Bakery. My name is Robin, obviously, just talked about that. I'm a principal cloud engineer at Linkit. We'll share, I'll share this slide deck at the end on my own website. And there will be a link to the blog series I just talked about at the end of this presentation. So let's get started. So the Azure Bakery, because of the available time today, we're not going through everything in the series. So I do recommend going through the series to further explore and solidify the information in this session. That's an important point. There's way more information in the blog series, but it's just too much to put it in 40, 45 minutes. So The idea behind this series is to approach Azure in an easy to understand and fun way. And the goal is to engineer and deploy solutions in the best way possible, while at the same time, we're trying to keep it simple. So we'll go through the foundational layers of every solution you may want to build in the future, and what ingredients do you need when you build these solutions. So let's start with the first layer, Azure Active Directory. So when you sign up for a Microsoft Cloud service, such as Azure, the tenant, an Azure Active Directory instance, is created. And this tenant represents your organization and is the first layer of our cake. Azure AD is Microsoft's cloud-based identity and access management service. Hit my spacebar again, put my keyboard a little bit further away. And we'll go through identity and some security services. So let's start with identity. To access and manage your Azure environment, you need an identity. This is essential for authentication and authorization. And authentication is the process of verifying who you are, whereas authorization determines what you can and cannot do. So let me say that one more time. Authentication is the process of verifying who you are, whereas authorization determines what you can and cannot do. And the first one I want to talk about is a user account. And obviously these enable users and administrators to log in and work with Azure. And when you authenticate, you need a username and a password, preferably followed by a second form of authentication called multi-factor authentication. And we'll look at that later as well. The next one I want to highlight is service principals. And these are like user accounts, but then for applications and automation tools to access and work with resources within your Azure environment. And the authentication is handled by a combination of the application identifier and a secret key or certificate. And the last one is called managed identities, and these provide an identity for your resources. And these identities can be used, for example, to access other resources, like the secret keys inside an Azure Key Vault. We're going to look at this in a later layer as well. And good thing to note here is that you don't have to manage your credentials. So if you use a managed identity, Azure manages the credentials for you. And when you talk about managed identities, there are like two types, and system assigned and user assigned managed identity, where the system assigned managed identity is created as part of a resource. So you can enable this or enable this during your deployment. And then this application or this resource has an identity within Azure Active Directory. So you can use this for example, a virtual machine. And a user assigned managed identity is created as a standalone resource, and you'll associate that with one or more resources. And for example, you use that for workloads that run on multiple resources but share the same identity. So then you don't have to set up all these different identities for all your different resources if they all belong to the same workload. And we're going to look at system assigned managed identity at the last layer, resources. So the next thing I want to talk about is security. There are a lot of different capabilities and offerings to enhance your security posture within Azure, like machine learning, conditional access policies, self-service, to name a few. There's way more, but we cannot go into all of these right now. We're going to go through multi-factor authentication and conditional access policies because I believe that these are like foundational security features you always want to or should be implementing. So let's start with multi-factor authentication. Right, this service adds a second form of authentication to the user's sign-in process. And the user is prompted for an additional form of identification, such as approving the sign-in or providing a code, finger, or face scan. And these requests are often handled through a second device, like, for example, your phone. And when you only use a password to authenticate, you leave an insecure attack vector, like something you have versus something you know. or something you know versus something you have. So this is one of the essential features you always want to enable. There's even a report like 99% of all the breaches can be prevented if everybody just enables multi-factor authentication. So essential part. Next up, conditional access. So conditional access policies are evaluated when a user wants to access a resource or another form of identity want to access a resource. And with conditional access, you bring signals together. So you see that in the image on the left side here, you see these signals here. And based on these signals, you can make decisions and allow or grant or block or allow or deny access to the resources behind your policy. And Azure conditional access policies use if-then-like statements. It's like in programming, if this, then that, to keep your organization secure and optimize the user experience. All right, that was the first layer of our cake. Azure Active Directory. We went through the identities, user accounts, service principals, and managed identities. We talked about system assigned versus user assigned managed identities. That will become clearer in a later stage. And we talked about security, specifically multi-factor authentication and conditional access policies. Next up, management groups. Management groups are a crucial aspect for managing access, policy, and compliance across your Azure environment. So a management group is like a container for your subscriptions and allows you to apply governance to all subscriptions within that specific management group. So most organizations have multiple subscriptions and management groups provide the possibility to organize subscriptions in subgroups. And these subscriptions inherit the configuration from the management group they're part of. So in this layer, we're going to look at enterprise scale landing zones, or also known as landing zones, specifically managed groups and subscriptions. These are like the core of your landing zone architecture. And even though the landing zone framework has enterprise scale in it, it's initially meant for enterprises. It's also beneficial for every organization, in my opinion. So it allows you to design your management groups and your subscriptions and thereby your Azure environment in a modular and scalable way. So, and after landing zones, we're going to look at Azure Resource Manager, and specifically, what is it? Like a consistent management layer, the scopes within Azure Resource Manager, and ARM or Azure Resource Manager templates. All right, landing zones. Landing zones represent a multi-subscription Azure environment, and it includes security, governance, networking, and identity by default. So they take all required resources into account and make sure these are available when you're engineering and deploying your solutions. So a good analogy to a landing zone is a set of services required to build a city. So before you create buildings and people moving into them, certain essential services, for example, power infrastructure or water and sewage facilities should be available, right? Otherwise, people don't have power, don't have water, etc. So, and what you see here is like a landing zone subscription. This is one part of the landing zone framework, and it includes a few things by default, like IAM, identity and access management, certain policies. You have to think about management and monitoring. What else? Security center, network watcher, something you can include. You have to think about networking, like, hey, I'm going for a hub and spoke connectivity model, or am I going to deploy an express route, or what I'm going to do with application gateways or API management gateway, all these services. And you have to think about shared services like Azure, like Active Directory, for example. Am I going to deploy domain controllers? And am I going to centralize these domain controllers so everybody that's using Azure can use these centralized services, the centralized domain controllers, Azure Firewall, all that stuff? Because everything you deploy, you have to pay for. So The more you can centralize and the more you can share, the better. So what does it look like, that the enterprise scale landing zone framework? Right? At the heart of your landing zone environment, you have the organization of management groups and subscriptions. So that's here. And the landing zone subscription we just looked at in the previous slide, that's this one. But there are also other things to consider. Okay, what I'm going to do with management? Am I going to centralize my logging? Am I going to do something with a SIEM solution, Azure Sentinel, for example? Or so it gives you like a framework for brainstorming. Like, hey, what do I have to think about? Right? The well-architected framework, cloud adoption framework, all these tools can help you design a robust and scalable Azure environment that's secure by design, governed, etc. So, and at the heart of your enterprise scale landing zone, you have like management groups and subscriptions. And the first level in your organization is always the tenant root group. That's the one here. And it's built in, so you cannot do anything with it. You can rename it, but that's not best practice. So just leave it like it is. And it allows you to apply governance at the directory level. And you can create different management groups beneath the tenant root group. You can go up to 6 levels deep. Microsoft advises like 3 to 4 levels to keep it like as simple as possible. But you can apply policies and configuration, role-based access control configuration on these management groups, and then they will automatically be inherited by the underlying management groups and underlying subscriptions. So you don't have to assign all your stuff for every subscription, but you can assign it on the management group and then govern it that way. So next up, Azure Resource Manager. So this is the service for managing and deploying resources in your Azure environment. ARM enables you to manage your resources by using the available tools like the Azure Portal, Azure PowerShell, Azure CLI, or REST clients to talk directly to the REST API endpoint, Graph API. And what you see here is that the same API handles all these different requests. So you have the same capabilities when you use these different tools, but get consistent results. So that's like the power of Azure Resource Manager. When you look at Azure Resource Manager, you have 4 levels or scopes. So you have like your management groups. Beneath your management groups, you have your subscriptions. Beneath that one, your resources. And finally, you have your, beneath that one, your resource groups. And finally, you have your resources. And like I mentioned before, the underlying levels inherit the settings or the configuration. So when you assign a policy on the subscription, here this one, then these resource groups will inherit the configuration, and the resources beneath that, or that are part of these resource groups, inherit the configuration as well. And if you look at these layers, you'll see that these are the same I use in the cake, only upside down. Because when you bake a cake, you start at the bottom, but in this image, it starts at the top. And Azure Active Directory is missing here, but you get the picture. Next up, Azure Resource Manager templates. They allow you to implement infrastructure as code for your solutions. And infrastructure as code has several benefits. It lowers the potential for human errors. You can create identical environments by using the same template multiple times. And you can reduce costs by creating test environments on demand. So you need a certain test environment. You just deploy that based on the same code you use in production. So you have like a consistent environments, right? And then when you're done testing or you're done deploying that specific stage, then you just remove or destroy the environment. So at that point, you don't have any costs for your test environment anymore. ARM templates are written in JSON. That stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And this is a lightweight data inter-exchange format. And JSON is easy for humans to read and write. Not everybody agrees. And easy for systems to parse and generate. And you'll see JSON is being used in a lot of different tools and things, but as well in ARM templates. And yeah, it's a steep learning curve, but eventually you'll get it, and you will see or harness the power of these ARM templates. And again, working with ARM templates give you repeatable results. So you're able to deploy the same resources in the same way. And they allow you to automate your resources deployment by integrating them with your favorite CI/CD tooling. All right, another layer done. So we looked at management groups, enterprise scale landing zones, and Azure Resource Manager. Next up, subscriptions. So subscriptions in their simplest are like containers for your resource groups and eventually resources. So when you deploy and use resources, the costs for the resources are built to your subscription. So your subscription is like the agreement with Microsoft and allows you to use their platform and their services. Subscriptions are mandatory when you want to deploy resources. So without subscriptions, you cannot deploy them. This is not possible. In this layer, we're going to look at specific design strategies and cost management, because every organization is different. So you have different design strategies, and management groups and subscriptions, like you already saw in landing zones, are flexible. So you can just create whatever you need or whatever you want. And there are multiple design strategies. So we're going to look at 3 of them. And cost management, because Azure enables you to build and deploy solutions that leverage the cloud's power. Like you have basically unlimited resources you can use or you can leverage. But eventually you're paying for the resources and services you use. So therefore, it's crucial to manage your costs. All right, design strategies. The first one, workload separation. I think this is the most straightforward approach. So you have like 2 management groups, one for production and one for pre-production. And both management groups include multiple subscription, like A, B, C, and D, where ownership or responsibility is the differentiator. Next is the application category strategy. This one builds on top of the workload separation approach by adding application categories under the production and pre-production management groups. The workload categories are different for every organization and are based on various topics like access controls, data protection needs, or compliance requirements. And because you have this flexibility and you can go up to 6 levels deep, you can also combine multiple strategies like the one you see here. So you have like a business unit that has multiple locations, maybe West Europe, North Europe, and then you'll see the whole approach we already looked at coming back, like pre-production, subscriptions, and then eventually your resource groups, and beneath these resource groups you have your resources. Next is cost management. We already talked a little bit about paying what you use, pay as you go as well. And cost management starts with proper planning. So what services do you select? What service tier or virtual machine size do you need? And you always start with collecting the requirements of your workload or your environment. And then you can use the Azure pricing calculator to estimate your applications or workload costs. So always start with planning, just like a road trip or moving or whatever. And try to design your workloads as efficient as possible. So focus on consumption models where you only pay for the number of transactions or runtime of the application, like consuming Azure Functions, for example. And use managed services when possible. So although the cost per unit for these managed services is often higher, they have lower operational costs because you're not managing the underlying infrastructure. And after you deploy your solution, you should regularly review your costs to optimize your resources and your Azure spending. So Azure cost management shows you where your money is going and is integrated with Azure Advisor that advises you on underutilized resources. So before you start using resources and start consuming Azure resources and paying for it, I think it's a good practice to set up some budgets, so budgets, spending quotas, and configure some alerts, so that if somebody does something stupid somewhere, deploys a really ridiculous sized virtual machine without knowing what they're doing, then before you know it, you get an alert and you can do something about it, because you will not be the first one to spend like a year's salary on a misconfiguration within Azure. So really important. And setting up these budgets and quotas support organizational accountability. So are we staying within our budgets? Is a specific department staying within their budgets, etc. So, all right. So we looked at subscriptions, specifically at design strategies and cost management. Next up, resource groups. So resource groups are containers, again, for resources this time, and they give you a way to group them. So resources in a resource group share the same life cycle and can only exist in one resource group at a time. So you can move, add, or remove resources at any time. Some resources are easier to move than others, but it is possible. And when you create a resource group, you need to provide a location, also known as a region. And because the resource group contains metadata about your resources, it's important that you specify the right location, because this can be essential for compliancy reasons. And good thing to note, if you remove a resource group, you remove all the resources that are inside that group. So beware when you remove something. In this layer, we're going to look specifically at regions. So a region is a set of data centers to ensure high availability. And we're going to look at naming convention. So naming convention scopes, like naming scopes. Certain resources has to be unique, for example. And we're going to look at naming convention components. Oh, it's really important to have a good and solid naming convention because you want to know which resources are which and etc. So you want to be able to identify your resources. So that's really important. And you cannot rename your resources after you deploy them. So it's really good to think about that beforehand. All right, first thing we're going to look at is regions. So as you see here in this slide, Azure is a global cloud service platform, and it comprises basically out of two key components: the physical infrastructure, like the data centers, and the global network. So the physical infrastructure consists roughly about 160 data centers divided across 54 regions, and they're all connected to the Azure global network. Maybe there are more regions right now. Can be this one is already outdated. And a region is a set of data centers to ensure high availability. So each region has a pair, and this pair is another region, preferably located at least 300 miles or 482 kilometers apart, which is sometimes impossible. But most of the pairs are directly connected. So this is really important. And it's recommended to utilize a regional pair when you're replicating data or building and deploying multi-regional workloads that require extreme availability. So, and for example, the regional pair for West Europe is North Europe. Most people in Europe know that, but so every region has a pair. East US, Central US, I think, or and all this information is available on the inside the documentation. So, naming scopes. Certain resources are by default available through the internet, and they are also accessible using a DNS name. So certain resources have to have a global unique name. Sometimes this can be challenging because most of the obvious names, just like domain names, already taken. So you have to be a little bit creative there. And next one is resource group. So then the name should be unique within the resource group. And the last one is resource attribute. And then the resource attribute name should be unique within the parent resource, like mentioned here, a subnet within a virtual network. So you cannot deploy a subnet with the same name inside the same virtual network. When you look at a naming convention and you look at what Microsoft advises, then they start with this image here. So they start with a resource type and they end with an instance number. And there are recommended naming components, abbreviations per resource type, and limits to take into account. And I will take you through these recommendations from left to right and my take on this. So if we look at resource type, this abbreviation represents the resource type and is used as a prefix or suffix. So prefix is at the beginning or suffix is at the end. Depends on your organizational standards or what you prefer. And it has to do with sorting and all that stuff. And next up is the workload or the application. So the name or identifier of the application or workload that the resource belongs to. And try to keep this as short as possible. So in this case, SharePoint, if you ask me, is way too long. I would make SP or I will create a number that represents SharePoint or whatever. Next up is the deployment environment. So the stage of the development lifecycle. So also try to keep this as short as possible. Trying to use letters, for example, P instead of production or D instead of dev. And then you'll end up with a region, and just like we talked about before, this is the geographical location where your resource is deployed. And my take on this is only using it when you're utilizing multiple regions. So don't use this when you're only deploying resources within one region, and even then maybe only for network resources. But there's not really one size fits all. Right? There's always choosing between different types of evil, so to say, you know. So you have to, make certain decisions, and eventually you come up with something that works. And eventually, lastly, you have your instance number, and this is like a 2 or 3 digit number used to differentiate multiple instances of the same resource. So am I going to deploy numerous instances of this specific resource? If I'm going to do that, or I think that's going to happen in the future, then the advice is to use an instance number. But this is not always necessary. So basically try to keep the name as simple and as compact as possible while you have the information you need inside your naming convention. So we looked at resource groups, and specifically at regions and naming convention components and naming convention scopes. So the last layer, resources. So we're going to add resources on top of all the previous layers, and with these resources, the cake really comes together. So we're going to look at the design recipe. So, hey, what is it we're going to add? What are these resources looking like? And eventually we're going to bake them. So that's the part I already did. So I already deployed the resources we're going to take a look at inside my own Azure environment, because I don't want to do the deployment while I'm presenting for obvious reasons. So, all right. The environment's design recipe is based on the enterprise scale landing zone architecture framework, like you can see here. And the management subscription contains a log analytics workspace for centralizing the logs, metrics, and audit data. You can see here. And the landing zone subscription, that's this one, includes the web application based on an app service app with an Azure SQL database as a backend. And the app service app uses a system assigned managed identity, there he is, to access and retrieve the Azure SQL service connection string from an Azure Key Vault. So during the deployment from the SQL backend, I'll put the connection string inside the key vault, and during the same deployment, the app service app retrieves that connection string and configures it within the app service app. And the app service app includes 2 deployment slots, a staging and a production deployment slot, and it allows you to swap your deployment into production and roll back if you want, for example. So, and I added 4 Azure Monitor Alert rules to monitor your web application. So let's switch to the resources that's on this screen, because this one is too wide, so I'll be doing that here, so I won't be looking into the camera anymore. But what you'll see here is I deployed 2 resource groups. I got like 2 subscriptions, a management subscription like we just looked at, and a landing zone subscription, and these are part of the management group structure I configured. So I got a landing zone management group here with the corporation in here, and then the landing zone subscription itself. And if I look at the platform, I've got a platform management group with a management group, and inside I got inside that management group, I got a management subscription. So a lot of management, but this way we centralize the logging inside of this management group. So I got a centralized log analytics workspace configured here. This one has like a global naming scope, so this name has to be unique all across Azure. So that's why I put this identifier in front of it. And the application is deployed in the application resource group. And all these different resources are configured to log their audit data, the metrics, and their logs to the log analytics workspace. And if we look at this application, you'll see the app service app, the app service app plan, and then the app service app itself that's built on top of that plan, or that uses the infrastructure that's part of this app service plan. The staging slot, the production slot is as part of the initial application, and a key vault, SQL database, SQL server, and on top of that SQL server, you have a SQL database. So, and if we look at the app service app, and we go to identity, now you'll see that this app has a system assigned identity enabled, has an object ID inside Azure Active Directory. Every object has an identifier, a unique ID. And this ID is used inside the key vault. So the key vault has an access policy that uses this ID that gives this application permissions to retrieve the connection string from the key vault. So, and if we'll go to the configuration here, come on, all right, and we look at the connection strings, you'll see there's a default connection string that's based on a key vault reference, has a type SQL server. And if we go to our key vault and we go to secrets, then you'll see that we can see them because I've added my user as to the access policy. Otherwise, I couldn't see the secrets myself. So I can manage the key vault, but I cannot retrieve any secrets. I have to specifically give myself access to do that. And you'll see the application here, the app service app, that has like get permissions for the secrets inside of this key vault. And if we look at secrets, then you'll see three secrets here, the SQL connection string, and the SQL admin username and SQL admin password that are generated during the deployment. And I'll do this on purpose. So this way you always have your admin username and your admin password, and nobody has to write them down anywhere. So they're part of this key vault, and it's all happens during the deployment. So, and if we go to the app, for example, and we go to diagnostic settings here, now you'll see that the diagnostic settings are being written to this log analytics workspace, and that goes for all the resources that are deployed here. And this whole deployment and design recipe and all the stuff we just talked about, you can find that here. I will share a link in the next slide, or the slide after that, to be precise. And this is the last layer, resources, where we'll go through the prerequisites you need, the resources we're going to deploy, the design recipe itself, like this one, an explanation of what we're deploying, and eventually we're baking. So it's like a tutorial included in here. It links to my GitHub. I don't know if this opens in a new page. No, it doesn't. So everything you need is in here. So if you want to follow along or you want to do this yourself, yeah, you got everything you need here. So and that being said, let's switch back to my presentation. So what's the last layer? Resources. So we looked at the design recipe and the actual baking. So adding the resources on top of all the underlying layers. So, and if you want to take a look at the series, it consists out of 6 parts, an introduction plus 5. This is the tiny URL that will get you to the series on Medium, IT Next, part of Linkit. And yeah, that was my presentation.
Robin, thanks a lot for all of this information. This was quite a bit of quite some information to process for me. But there were some small bits and pieces I had a little hook and I understood something of it. So I have a couple of questions about that.
All right.
So I think in the Azure Active Directory layer you talked about MFA and advising to just turn it on, right? Mm-hmm. Do you advise on turning it on for everybody at all times, or are there specific situations where you'd want to step up your security?
Depends. It's an annoying answer, right? It depends, but I think you want to enable it at all times for your privileged users, right? Combine it with privileged identity management. I talk about that in the series as well. But at least your privileged users with more power, you should always use MFA. And if you look at for your normal users, right? If you just leverage Azure, then you don't have the amount of users inside of Azure Active Directory you normally would have when you also use Office 365, right? Of Microsoft 365, I have to say, by the way. But so then my advice would be enable it for everyone. All right, you have to think about what you're using, basic authentication, Exchange, etc. So yeah, it takes planning, but if you have the option to do that, then the advice will be definitely yes. Yeah.
Okay, strong advice there. Yeah, so another one. If you look at the landing zones, it goes down right all the way through the resources, right? So the web app is also in there, the SQL database is in there. So where does the landing zones end, and where does whatever lands on the landing zone start? As I see, if I look at a landing zone, I'm thinking about some kind of base infrastructure that you put stuff into.
Yeah. Well, landing zones, you can make it as crazy or as complex as you want, right? And my advice will be keep it as simple as possible. But what you do, the landing zone, so the subscription where you actually land your application on, is just part of the whole landing zone framework, right? Because you also have like a management subscription that's not the landing zone for your application, but it's part of your whole framework where you think about logging, for example. So you have to make certain decisions, and certain decisions are binding, like, hey, if I got a connectivity subscription with a hub in there where I centralize like a firewall and an express route or a gateway or whatever, and then I would deploy like landing zone subscriptions, and these landing zone subscriptions based on the requirements, if they need like on-premise or hybrid connectivity or whatever, then you can deploy a spoke in there as well, and then they can leverage the hub. So then you get this whole modular design capabilities. So you need something else, just add it, right? So it's a lot of work to get it right, so to say. Especially if you work in an enterprise and you got a lot of things to take into account. But eventually, if you do it the right way, you can always deviate, so to say, during your deployments. Like, hey, we didn't think about this. Okay, how are we going to solve this? Okay, I think we can do it like that. Or maybe we have to create another management group next to all the stuff we already have, because this is like an extra confidential zone or whatever, and has extra restrictive policies. Or it's a lot to take in and a lot to digest. But I think that it's the right approach to design your environment, even if you're not an enterprise, because you see everybody struggling. Like, hey, I got all these different capabilities, but what is the right way? And there's not really one size fits all. So it's well, what else to say, right?
So we'll just reference your articles then and start from there.
Yeah, and the documentation from Microsoft is really, really good, right? They really did a good job with all the stuff they have, and then they're still building on top of that. So just take some time, go to the Cloud Adoption Framework, and automatically you will go to the well architected framework, and then you definitely get some value out of this information. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot for your session. It was really helpful
thanks.
for us. And I think next up, Jorrit is doing the raffle for the giveaway, right?
Yeah, that's right. So last month we had a referral link for the Azure Live event, and we actually got the names back from the organizers, the names that actually left their home address, because up for grabs is one VIP package for that event, and I think it's a physical package because they need to send it to your address. So yeah, I don't know what's in it, but it's a big surprise. And these are the names that are eligible. So I'm going to push the magic button and let's see who's going to win the VIP package. So good luck, everybody. Whoa, that's really close, but it turns out to be Robbie in the end. So Robbie, congratulations. We will give your name to the Azure Live event people and make sure that VIP package finds its way to you. So congrats. And this is the end of the show for tonight. So I hope to see everybody again next month, and have a great evening.